right, we should be starting. I see people joining in now. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar today. In the interest of time, as people are rolling in, I'm going to start with our introduction. So my name is Christina Giordano, she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm the Partnerships and Community Manager here at AllVoices. For context, AllVoices is an employee feedback management platform that helps employees really share anonymously and safely what they're thinking about company culture in terms of harassment, bias, or any culture issues directly to company leadership. And with the platform, companies have real-time proactive data that helps them identify issues before it becomes systemic problems, improve company culture, and really provide a psychologically safe space for folks to feel heard and, of course, do their best work. To set the stage for today's conversation around refreshing your talent management process for 2022, we know that whether you're remote, hybrid, or in-person, talent management needs to happen intentionally. Creating equitable spaces where folks feel like they can do their best work does not just happen. And this includes psychological safety, compensation, professional development, all keys to retaining talent. In our recent State of the Workplace Discrimination Survey, 80% of respondents share that they still experience it while working from home. And according to a Forbes study, employees say that if they stay longer at companies than 2 years, sometimes they're getting paid less than folks coming in the door as well at 50%. And just one more stat in terms of a LinkedIn survey found that companies with better training had 53% lower attrition rate, which reduces hiring costs and improves productivity. So all of these things bubble up to company culture and retaining talent as well. And with that, I will pass to our fantastic panelists. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your perspectives with us. If you want to remember this order, we'll go Candace, Iraisa, Erin, and Cindy. If you want to share your pronouns, role, and the work you do at your company.
Hi, everyone. I'm Candace. My pronouns are she and her. I work for Mursion Incorporated. And I am head of talent acquisition, director of talent strategy. And right now we are building the team from the ground up. So almost tripling in size, going from 70 employees about a year ago to a little over 230, building out processes and thinking about everything from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. And I will pass it to Iraisa.
Hello, well, thank you, Candace, and thank you, Christina, for the invitation and the opportunity to share stage with this phenomenal panel and our attendees. I am Iraisa Jones. I currently serve as the head of HR, people experience and talent acquisition for an entertainment and technology organization based out of New York City. We too are growing exponentially, and I am building a lot of things from the ground up. In my role, I oversee all aspects of talent and people operation from soup to nuts. And I do all of this while working very, very closely with our leaderships and business leaders and driving the business forward. So super happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. Passing it over to Erin.
Thanks. I am very excited, as I just saw, to be on an all-female panel, especially this group of women. So my name is Erin Grau. I'm the co-founder of Charter. It's a media and services company focused on workplace transformation. Before Charter, I spent my career in global organizations and startups at the intersection of talent and operations, like a lot of women in this panel. And also, like a lot of women in this panel, steering people and organizations toward the future. So I worked at, like I said, startup space. And then also I was the first vice president of transformation at the New York Times, also the VP of digital operations at the New York Times. And in that role, my job was to build the systems and culture to transform work. And I'll hand it over to Cindy.
Thank you, Erin. I'm Cindy Gordon. I go by she, her, and I am currently running my own people consulting and advisory practice. Prior to that, I was a two-time head of people in the tech startup space. And then before that, I spent a really long time at McKinsey & Company. Thank you for creating this space for us today, Christina. Really excited to be here with this amazing group of women.
Awesome. Definitely appreciate all of your perspectives on this panel. I want to start off by talking about all of the changes we've seen over the past 2 years. Life has been a lot. And this question is for Cindy and Erin in terms of what you're seeing out in the world as former operators too. What are some new strategies you're seeing that companies really implement throughout the pandemic that are here to stay with us, such as flexible work, inclusive benefits, creating wider talent pools, and more? Cindy, you can go first.
Great. I could probably talk about this forever, so I'll try to be really succinct. First off, I want to say that we are experiencing a work revolution right now. We're a part of this. And I think it's particularly fascinating to be in this time and to be living through it. So we're in this candidate-driven talent market. And what I love, especially given the roles that we have in the people spaces, seeing more acknowledgement of where work fits into the myriad of other interests, responsibilities, and ways of living. And the candidate-driven market itself is helping us further what we do in our roles. So in my opinion, where we're at now, we're almost in December, which is crazy to me. Hybrid work, work from anywhere, investment in mental health and well-being, those are table stakes things at this point. And so I'm excited to talk about some more emerging things that I've been seeing or exploring in the space. One thing that I am interested in learning more about and seeing hit more mainstream is the concept of job sharing. And for those who might not know what that is, and excuse me if I'm like dumbing this down, but it's where two or more people share a role that might have originally been designed for one person in a full-time capacity. I'm seeing more of this in there, even companies that have sprouted up that are trying to perpetuate this concept. I'm really excited to see where that could go, and it's something that I'm even particularly interested in myself. I also am really happy to see that there's more investment in the people function itself, whether that means bringing in a head of people earlier to help be that strategic leader versus firefighting and being reactive to things that these tangled balls of mess that need to be unwound. So I'm happy to see that, or investing in more software and technology to reduce the amount of administrative burden that is placed on the people team, and not a good use of our time anyway. Staffing up and adequately paying people professionals for the value that they bring to the table. I think that is something that should be happening, quite honestly, but we need to ride on the coattails of what's happening in the world. And then I've seen more, and like I've seen this more through my consulting practice too, where there is an investment in third-party expertise and advisory support and coaching to people professionals. And a side note, I'm really intrigued by the emergence of psychedelics in the business world and how that can further DEIB efforts and executive coaching. I don't know much about it, but I am digging in. I'm really intrigued by it. And then like this third bucket, and then I'll stop talking, is building work environments that we've never been a part of before by purposefully investing in hiring, programming, supporting, developing, and empowering professionals from marginalized communities. That should be happening, but now like it is more at the forefront. Okay, I'll stop talking. Erin?
I'm listening. I'm taking notes on all that. So actually, I have a lot of the same things, so I'll actually try to say something different. But yeah, to Cindy, like the war for talent is intensifying. I think the companies that are going to win are the companies that don't think about going back to work, but moving forward. Also recognizing that the people coming back to the office are not the same people who left it. I think there's two big themes that we're seeing again on companies that I think are going to kind of win. Is the belief and the understanding that rigidity of work is gone and flexibility is here to stay. I'm going to talk more about flexibility because I think it's really important that we figure out how flexibility shows up in a lot of different ways. It's not just your schedule or location. And then the other big thing that I think companies that are going to win are doing they're reinventing how you use an office. So the office is a tool to get work done. It's not a place to get work done. And when we hear employees that are frustrated that they've been working for 20 months at home at their, or wherever they are in the world. They don't want to have to go to an office and do that same thing. And what companies need to do is figure out how they're going to, I mean, most companies moving to hybrid work, and hybrid work could be great because you have the strengths of traditional co-location. So that's smoother coordination, collaboration, knowledge sharing, socialization, and those connections are how information flows through a company. And you also get the benefits of remote work. And so in some cases, that's like higher engagement, especially with employees of color and with women and caregivers. And then also even reduce carbon footprint too, and greater, of course, greater flexibility. And so I think those are some things that companies should be thinking about if they want to keep their talent. And then I talked about flexibility a little bit, but just thinking in terms of how do you make the implicit explicit? How do you, we had a prep call for this. We talked about this, and you don't want to create two-tier workforce where you allow for flexibility, but you don't set the floor and the ceiling of that. So there's a number of people that are going in for FaceTime and they have disproportionate access to promotions, raises, and special projects. And so how can you make sure you're enabling the flexibility in terms of like where and when and how people are working? Maybe you're doing more asynchronous work. But how are you doing that in a way that does not exacerbate inequity in the workplace? So these are some of the things I'm thinking about and hearing about.
I think that's definitely important to remember that Cindy, I think you mentioned the phrase of just creating workplaces that we've never seen before. A lot of folks before 2 years ago had never worked remotely even a day or a couple of hours. So really thinking about redesigning systems, but intentionally as well, not just saying now we're a flexible workplace and everybody chooses their own adventure as well. We know bias creeps in. We really want to create equity as well. Candace, in our pre-call as well, you talked about full-time employees and part-time employees. And I want to ask your opinion about how we should be thinking about creating these intentional, equitable systems in a hybrid or remote first workplace environment.
Yeah, that's a great question. So to Sydney's point earlier, you are seeing a lot of employees come in and say, you know what? I don't want to work 100% of the time. I actually need more flexibility in my schedule. I want to work 60% of the time. Maybe I want to job share with somebody else who's working 40% of the time. So here at Mursion, we offer virtual reality services. So we're lucky enough where 85% of our employees are remote. We do have some individuals that go into the office in San Francisco, but it is a choice. Like no one has to go into the office. But because majority of our employees are remote across the globe, we do a lot more to make sure we're building morale and culture and make sure we're having one-on-ones, listening to feedback, especially with the type of work that we're doing here around diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership workshops and all these other things. So when we're thinking about like mental well-being, a lot of it has to do with flexibility. What type of programs are you offering your employees, not just the full-time employees, but your part-time employees? So like employee assistant programs, we're offering a lot of unlimited paid time off for our employees, holidays, thinking about like what really matters to the employee and not just to the business. Another thing we're doing is we're actually listening to the employees. So running different surveys, like what do you want? What do you need from us as an employer? Like what makes you come to work every day? So not just thinking about someone punching in and punching out, but moving to this workforce where it's about productivity. If you can produce work in 4 hours versus 8 hours, or you can produce better work working in the evenings versus you working typical 9 to 5, why are we having discussions or disagreements about that? So providing flexibility. Another thing, I believe, Erin, you said this, is like the workplace looks different. My son is home this week. So my son joined a couple of Zoom calls earlier today. So again, 2 years ago, that was unheard of. It was very unprofessional. You were embarrassed if anyone made a noise in the background. That's if you were even allowed to work from home several years ago. And now it is such a different environment where you feel okay to share your intimate space with those that you work with. So when you're thinking about mental well-being and hybrid versus remote, I think we also need to think about how are employers building integrity and trust with their employees. because you're now allowing them to share in a space where this has been a very private space for people for a very long time. You never shared your home life or you're traveling, your children, you're a caregiver, all these things that we used to hide in the past, now we're sharing. So I think when we're thinking about like mental well-being, hybrid versus remote, we're not just thinking about like, is the employee set up at home to work and are they being productive, but like, how do you feel in whatever space you're in working? How can we help you? How can we be more supportive to the employee, whether you're a full-time employee or a part-time employee? If that means you don't need 2 monitors and a laptop to do your work, like how can we lessen the amount of equipment that you have? For us at Mursion, we have simulation specialists. They're wearing headgear. They have multiple monitors. So for some of the other employees we have, they can travel, they can work from anywhere, but our simulation specialists, they're kind of stuck to a desk because they have so much equipment. So again, thinking about remote versus hybrid, part-time versus full-time, what does that look like? How are we job sharing? How are we listening to the employees? How are we educating them? And how are we making sure we're meeting them where they're at and providing these things for them?
Absolutely. I think setting up those systems, making sure that people are actually taking advantage of them as well in terms of job sharing and mental well-being, and understanding kind of how leaders are exemplifying, like yourself as well, and bringing kind of your child on Zoom and just, seeing that it's okay to do that because we're in this environment, and bringing your kind of full self to work. Iraisa, how are you thinking about hybrid and remote and kind of equity at Vindex?
Well, I don't think I have anything else to add. Cindy and Erin and Candace have done a phenomenal job at describing a lot of the things that we're doing here. I think that we are practicing a very creative and intentional, and I will use the word intentional throughout this conversation, because in order for us to implement and roll out initiatives and programs that will work and that will sustain the workforce that we want, we have to be intentional every single day. We started creating, I'll say this, we're leading with flexibility and being a nimble workspace. Our employees work from everywhere. Our office, as I think Erin mentioned, our office is a tool. We recently acquired and opened our office here in Midtown, and we are sort of leaning towards, we have 2 hot or popular days where people come in and either browse or work together, sit in a conference room, go for lunch, and they utilize the space to enhance their productivity and enhance how they feel about being an employee here at Vindex. So this is one of the areas that we have sort of turned around, and whereas before it was a place to be 5 days a week, it is now a tool in order for our employees to keep being phenomenal and outstanding and bringing their best self to work. One of the areas that we are also focusing on is support to our managers. Our managers now have to manage talent that are in different spaces, people that are completely virtual, people that are hybrid, and talent that is here present, and this is what works for them. So how do we equip our leaders to continue developing talent in different spaces, continue to enhance collaboration, continue to ensure that people are working together when they are not necessarily together? And that those tools and those resources and working on those skill sets will pass on to what our employees see on a regular basis. So that's really important to us. That's really important to me. It's working with my leadership in, hey, let's continue to enhance our workforce, our team members. The other item that I like to mention is challenges. Whereas in the past, we were able to identify challenges either because we were having a meeting or because we actually saw it, we had a visual. We now do not have that. And it is important to stay connected through that flexibility that I am a cheerleader and a proponent of, and ensure that we don't lose sight of what's important to employees, individuals, right? People. So that's one of the areas that I keep my eye on. And how do we fix that? And how do we sort of keep the pulse on it is communication. And I think Candace or Cindy said it. It's how do we ensure that we are communicating and using all the tools available to stay connected with our employees. I love surveys, polls, skip level meetings, town halls, small groups. I think last week, we just had a small get together where I was able to see some folks that I had not seen in a while and have everybody just really connect. And we were able to gather great information moving forward for things that we can actually do and great actionable items. So those are some of the things that I think of when I think about the future of work. I think about remote work. I think about what is our group or organization is going to look like in the next couple of months, years, decades, if you will.
Yeah. I think that's really important to show up for the full employee, for a full team member, understanding that life is not just about working and you can't assume what people need and want as well. You need to ask them, you need to offer all these different ways to ask for that feedback and not be afraid of it, to really lean into it. We mentioned a couple times kind of roles outside of work that people are in, if they are parents, if they are caretakers. And we've seen a lot of companies really design intentional systems to really make sure that people feel supported, as well operationalize equity. Erin, I want to kind of ask a question to you in terms of, can you share some examples of how you've seen companies and also maybe specifically leaders or people managers effectively lean into supporting caretakers and also standing up for racial justice in their community, since that's something that people are expecting their company to really care about and invest in?
Yeah. So many things. I definitely won't be able to cover all of them, but I'll say a few things on my mind. I guess the first is that there's just this incredible pressure on the private sector to step up and lead in racial justice, mental health, support for caregivers, because of the failings of institutions. Like, you just have to look at the Build Back Better economic recovery package that went from 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave to 4 to 0 and back to 4, and fingers crossed 4 makes it in. And so that pressure is going to the private sector. And then also, I think the role of an organization and a leader, frankly, needs to be redesigned. In February 2020, if you were a great manager or leader, you just looked after your employee and their output from maybe 9 to 5. And now you really need to positively impact the lives and livelihoods of your employees, their families, and their communities. And so I think there's like a expectation setting at organizations to say, like, this is what employees, certainly, as you said, Christina, like, expect. They want to be at a values aligned company. And also just to say, like, companies have so much power and so much talent within them to actually really fight these structural inequities. So anyway, so that's my thought about that. In terms of, there's so many ways to answer this question. I think with DEI, I think with all of it, like, applying the same rigor to a DEI strategy and initiatives as you do to any other area of the business is really important. And what we hear a lot of times is, a company might hire someone to lead DEI. They don't empower them. They don't give them resources. They don't have a team. They don't have money. They don't even there's no accountability. And so you would never run an area of business that way. And so that's like one big piece of advice. And then also just, like, I think, kind of tactically looking at the employee life cycle and what equity means across the entire employee life cycle. And so that's, and again, obviously there's like many touch points, but that's kind of high level what I think, like, a big piece of work mostly a DEI leader is probably leading and best equipped to do, but it's a piece of work that every company should have. I think when we've talked a lot about hybrid work, I think one of the things, again, I think it came up a few times, is that we want to make sure that talent management practices and internal practices are shored up, and you make the implicit explicit, and you are defining team norms. So one example of that is caregiving. So if you're saying, sure, you can be a caregiver in the middle of the day if you have needs for your children, but you have to go a step further and say, okay, like this is what that looks like. This is how you model it. This is what it looks like. So Helen Cupp at Slack's Future Forum had this great recommendation for us. She actually wrote about it, but and we adapted it. So in Slack, you can have global away messages, status updates, and you can change them. So the 5 standard, it's like in a meeting, on vacation, sick. And she changed hers so that 1 is caregiving. It's a heart and caregiving. So that's the standard when you open the away message, that's standard. And so it's just, how can you signal to people what the company norms are? And again, do some of these things just publicly so that they become like part of your culture and how things work. So yeah, I'll actually let Cindy answer some more, but I have like many, many other ideas. And then performance reviews is a whole other, and talent management is a whole other maybe conversation in the next 30 minutes. But
I could listen to you keep going, Erin. I don't know if I have anything value add here, but so I'll start on the caregiving front. I already mentioned job sharing. I do think that's a very creative way of tapping into an amazing talent pool that exists beyond the traditional confines of like looking at full-time. The full-time workforce is available. We're missing a huge bucket of talent. And on the like tactical side of things, it's also defining what caregiver means at your organization. There's something far beyond thinking about a caregiver as a parent to children, right? We have, with COVID, we have people who are taking care of sick family members or elderly. We have people who are caretaking in different ways. We as people professionals are caretakers. So there are different ways of what taking care actually means, and making sure that we're being equitable on that front too. And that is not to downplay the responsibilities that what we might traditionally think as caregiving is. I also think like there's, like Iraisa mentioned, using the word intentional and using that intentionally. And I think that's important too, is taking ownership and even identifying and understanding where your organization sits. We see it happen across the board where, oh, I read this article, or I saw this happen at XYZ company, we should do it here. And it doesn't really match up with what is rewarded or the behaviors that are actually supported at a company. So I think owning where you stand and what you can actually support as a company, but also pushing that envelope a bit to see where you can go is big. On the racial justice side, my bar is unfortunately low here. There's so much work to be done to move the needle. And I think even by starting with taking a stance on what you believe in as a company is huge. I look at Ben & Jerry's or Patagonia that like could be perceived as taking a really bold and brave stance. And were they at risk of losing customers or partnerships? Probably. But how else are we going to shake up and dismantle the systemic racism that exists that has existed for decades at our companies? We got to shake it up, and we got to be willing to take some losses. So I don't have anything like super groundbreaking here. And Erin, feel free to tack on with any additional thoughts if you felt like you had to truncate what you were sharing.
No, yeah, I mean, I just have so many. I mean, I think what you were saying about culture, like, so one thing that we also talked in our prep call, if you haven't educated yourself on white supremacy culture and how it shows up in the workplace, it's really important, because I think some things that we have been praising, like, do you know how many job specs have, someone actually pointed this out to me the other day. We want someone who has the ability to work at a breakneck pace. That's wild that we encourage that, and we actually like revere that in companies. And so I think doing the real work to kind of understand how we got here as an organization, as I guess a country too, but like as organizations, and I think to Cindy's point, like consciously intentionally push against those long-held beliefs and those long-held ways of working, and to escape the gravitational pull of the status quo.
It is a very good call to action of not going by the status quo as well, and really taking a fine-tooth comb at your internal systems to see how you can make them more equitable, how you can make them more inclusive. We're talking about personalization, seeing what's working, but also coming back to your organization to say, okay, acknowledging where we actually are as well. And I think that equity across the organization, Erin, to your point too, requires everyone, no matter if you are a formal leader, people manager, executive, or you just joined the company, everybody really needs to be invested in this. And folks are asking about it when they are in the candidate experience. There's been a lot of talk around the Great Resignation, and someone pointed out to me the subreddit around anti-work, and just really holding companies and leaders accountable for what they're doing and kind of where they're investing their work. Candace, I wanted to ask if you are seeing just like any differences in the candidate experience because of the Great Resignation, or if you felt kind of an impact by that as well. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and yes. I don't know the simplest way to put it, but yes. I think anyone who's in a people role right now is feeling the heat. Your inbox is probably full because everyone's trying to recruit you because they think you're going to come to their organization and solve all their problems. Candidates are looking for things that honestly should be offered. We're looking for flexibility. You're looking for respect. You're looking for, a company to walk in that has a great culture. I can talk personally about myself. If I'm going to work for a company and you're saying I stand with Black Lives Matter, or I'm taking a stance on anything that involves racial injustice or social injustice at all, I expect you to put money behind that and resources behind that and actually do what you're saying you're doing in the media. So a lot of the times when we're interviewing candidates, we're not technically interviewing them, they're interviewing us at this point. They're asking a lot of the good questions. What benefits do you offer? I need to make sure that these benefits align with what I need in my life today. How are you training and developing me to progress in this role? Whether that means you're laddering up and you're moving into a managerial role, or you're growing outside your function and you're growing somewhere else. I think in the past, a lot of employers put the onus on employees. Like, you want to grow, you want to learn, you want to develop, you do that outside of work. And maybe if we're large enough and we have the resources, maybe we'll reimburse you. Now, learning and development is huge. And I'm not saying it wasn't there in the past, but look at how much companies have for an L&D budget today versus several years ago, because employees are saying, I'm already putting in 40, 50, 60 hours a week to work for you. And then you want me to put in an extra 10, 15, 20 hours outside of work to educate myself to do this job. It's a lot we're asking people to do. So right now, not just myself, but I think any talent person I talk to that's recruiting, and you're thinking of creative and innovative ways to attract talent, engage with talent, talk to people from diverse backgrounds, we're all thinking about the same thing. Like, they're interviewing us. Like, what can we provide new hires, employees? What does onboarding look like? How are we managing that employee life cycle? How are we training and developing managers? I believe one of you mentioned it earlier around communicating the benefits that you have. That's one thing we're doing a lot of at Mursion. We're offering lunch and learns to talk about the benefits we have. So many people, especially women and people of color, don't even understand the benefits that organizations offer. They're not utilizing the benefits, and they're losing out on so much. So with the Great Resignation, candidate experiences, of course, salary is a huge thing right now. Like, what are you offering me? Onboarding's key. Like, are you really training and developing your person the first 90 days? Are you setting them up for success? Are we looking for quote unquote unicorns. It's 2 roles in one. To Erin's point, I need you to hit the ground running as soon as you join the organization. I need you to take on 3 people's job, even though I advertise it as 1. So people are smart. I think people are coming together. They're realizing their worth, and they're putting a lot of the onus on the employer now, which I do agree with. It should be on the employer. We should be creating brave spaces. And I specifically use that word, not safe spaces, but we should be creating brave spaces at work where people can come, be their authentic selves. They can have a manager that is there and equipped and trained to manage to that person, and not to a group of people that are homogenous, but they're managing to the actual individual, and they're able to manage whether it's up or into another function. And I think that's where the real work, that's where we have to do the real work, is really around training, development, learning, and creating this culture where people can come in and really question the status quo.
If I may add to what Candace just said, I think it boils down to, we have educated consumers, we have educated and well-rounded talent. People know their value. People are growing and developing themselves, and they are coming in with a value proposition, and they want something in turn that's going to be equally beneficial, right? Equally in value. So they now understand what they're looking for, what's going to make them happy, what's going to keep them engaged, what's going to keep them motivated, and what's going to keep them at and with employers, right? Whereas in the past, that may not have been as important. I think that talent has also changed in the sense that we are now people first, right? Whereas in the past, employees were assigned, were blended in with their jobs. They were their title or what they did. Now people are, in essence, people, mothers, sisters, sons, wives, etc., right? And they want to bring that to the workplace, and that's first and foremost. So they want those needs fulfilled before they can produce for an employer. So I think that has made a critical impact in the negotiation part and what each of the parties are looking for.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of what we're talking about today too is around the employer brand of a company, how you are marketing yourself to current and potential employees, and really living the values that you say that you have as well, and really holding people accountable and understanding kind of where you are within the organization. I think there are also a lot of articles and research out there around the impacts that people managers have. And Candace, you brought this up in terms of managers being equipped, resourced, and invested in as well, especially folks who are moving from an individual contributor role. This question is for anyone, but what does it really look like to equip managers, especially today, with the resources and tools to be effective leaders and really listen to their team and operate at a high level and motivate folks as well?
Christina, if I can just add one more thing to that last point. So if we think about the space that we're in today, and even the conversation that we're having, and the fact that candidates are comfortable asking you questions now, like that wasn't a thing a couple of years ago, where someone would ask, hey, I saw something on Glassdoor, I see you have a negative review. They're comfortable having a voice on any platform, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's their social media platforms, and questioning employers. I think we're definitely moving into a different space where people feel a little bit more comfortable, and they're more comfortable saying no, like, I don't need this, I don't have to do this. You need to allow me to be who I am to join this organization. So like the fact that we're able to have this conversation, talk about white supremacy, talk about women, talk about, not following the status quo and questioning leaders, it just says a lot. And I think that really contributes to the Great Resignation and how employees and, potential prospects and candidates feel about questioning their potential employers as well. We have a voice that we haven't had before, essentially.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. It's good to see the progress that has been made in terms of people being comfortable asking the questions, and also interesting to see everybody's responses and answers to be authentic and genuine and to really show evidence of how they're working towards these goals that they say that they're working towards. At Mursion, how are you thinking about equipping people managers to really live out the mission and retain the folks on their team?
That's a good question. We are investing in training and development for our managers. So one of the main areas, especially around the work that we're doing, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. DE&I is always changing. So we're working with a very diverse simulation specialist population and community. The work we're doing is extremely challenging, and it's something that I actually challenge any organization with. If you are going to invest in developing people managers, your leadership team, your executive team, how are you also investing in marginalized groups where there are these huge gaps of learning and development and training, especially if you look at the tech industry, you look at some industries where it's predominantly one demographic that's working in that industry. So like we are investing in, how to provide feedback, how to receive feedback from your employees, how to conduct a proper one-on-one meeting. A lot of people don't really know how to do that, or they're using a one-on-one as a status update when we can Slack a status update of what's going on. And instead of a status update during your one-on-one, like how are you using this as a time of like a working session, or how are you developing your employees? A lot of managers don't even know how to create development plans for their employees, and they rely heavily on their people and culture teams to do this. So we are trying to put the onus back into people managers and the leadership and exec team and provide them with tools that they need in order to grow their teams, versus people managers putting the onus on the people and culture team. We're not necessarily managing their direct reports on a day-to-day. That is not our specialty, their function. So providing them with resources to manage to the person and not necessarily to the team, how to provide feedback, how to take in feedback, how to hold someone accountable, how to think about like culture differences and norms, things along those lines.
I'll add another perspective to that, and that was great. I'll say the programs and the resources that are available should mirror or be an extension to equip and enhance what managers are doing. For example, performance evaluations, year end. I think those should be simple, concise, and very straightforward tools to equip managers to not only manage, but collaborate with their talent and enhance or propose or propel employee development. So one of the things that I'm rolling out for this year end, it's a pretty straightforward and simple year-end process. And one of my requirements is that the manager requests or identified in conjunction or in collaboration with the employee at least one development program for that employee for next year, right? So what I'm looking for and what I'm trying to equip my managers with and my leadership team with is this should be a dual process where both are benefiting, not only the organization, but the employee as one, as an individual, and two, as an employee, right? So that's one of the things that I'm like, you have to come back to me with a perfect year-end process, one that's detailed and accurate, but also with that an opportunity for that employee to continue to grow and develop. So I think that's a perspective in how we can ensure that our managers are managing and leading the right way.
Yeah, I think this is all amazing. And and feels so right to me. And in my experience, I would just add that like, kind of like zooming out, that so many companies haven't set the clear expectations for what their managers should do. So if you're an individual contributor, you drive business impact through strategy and execution. If you're a manager, I think you should be driving business impact through hiring, developing, training, advancing talent. And at a lot of companies, we think that you're an IC and with some people that report into you. But every person who has a manager wants that manager's whole job to be their success. And so I think there's like a moment, it's actually great because we're in a moment of like hitting the reset button to really articulate what the role of a manager is, how they drive business impact, and then like the competencies and the training and the scripts kind of fall from that. But I think that is like a very important thing that organizations often miss.
And just to add on there, like the idea that there is only one path and you need to pursue that path because there aren't clear expectations, or there isn't even clear thinking or foresight on what that could look like for an organization, will automatically move them out of the running to be a potential employer. That the other thing is making sure, if you do have rubrics or competencies in place, to make sure that you're weaving in the skill sets that are needed out of a manager or an IC that might be in an equivalent level on what it looks like to work remotely or in a hybrid work environment. It's a different skill set that is more reliant upon different ways of communicating than we're accustomed to. And so even revisiting what status quo foundation exists at the company can help to reset expectations with folks. And like, even if we think about before that, how to onboard somebody adequately, rethinking onboarding programming to fit the new models of how we work is really important to be able to set people up for success. It's less of a linear focus and more of a river and a stream that like might branch out into a bunch of different places.
To add to that, when we're thinking about developing managers, one thing we're trying to do here, DE&I should never be secondary. So that should be part of these rubrics. When you're thinking about the values of a company, when you're thinking about performance reviews, career laddering and development, when we have a performance review, part of that performance review should be, how are you managing diversity? How are you increasing or how are you adding the value of culture to this organization? That should never be like, are you doing this? Let's check this box. And great if you are, like, that's your job, especially as a people manager and a leader. And then the second thing, even if you are an individual contributor, you can still be a leader in that position. You don't have to be a people manager to be an effective leader. So I think those are some of the things that we're thinking about. And the last point, when thinking about performance reviews, I do think that should tie back to talent acquisition. So how are your teams working together to create that job description? Because we should be taking that job description, all the competencies, the skills, the requirements, that should be the piece of paper that kind of flows through to those one-on-ones, to your performance review. That's how you are being measured. So it shouldn't be any different from day one when you were hired, unless you're getting some sort of promotion or you're told something different about your role. But like, that should be the first step in how you're attracting and acquiring talent, from how you're actually interviewing them. Are you interviewing them based on how you're going to evaluate them during that performance review? And then how do you grow them from there?
100%. Everybody should. I was talking to someone the other day and they said something similar in terms of having a lens of equity and everything in your to-do list, not adding it to the bottom or, somewhere in there. It should be a part of everybody's process as well, and clear as kind. I think that's for Brene Brown, but having those expectations and really laying them out, really having that two-way conversation with folks is really important as well, especially as a people manager. We have a question for, I think this is for anybody, no one's specified, but heading into 2022, how do you prioritize what to focus on? You all discussed training managers, investing in professional development, thinking about job descriptions. How do we think about prioritization? I'm on the people team and feel stretched thin in time and budget.
I can jump in. I have two frameworks if this is helpful. So one, and I'm happy to share if you want to email me or ping me later or LinkedIn me, I will send it to you. So two things. One, I talked about earlier, which is like equity across the entire employee life cycle. So literally like looking at kind of the activities, initiatives, systems that enable equity across the employee life cycle. The second one is kind of related, but it's a talent gaps and opportunities assessment. And so if it doesn't sound like you're innovating in, well, I'm not sure, like there's innovating into white space where like nothing exists and you're just like kind of doing it from scratch, this wouldn't work. But if you have some things and you're trying to improve some areas, like you mentioned, job specs, so like that suggests that you have something and you want to be improving some of these things, like this might be the tool for you. So I would like get organized first, and then you can plot it on maybe an ease impact matrix really quickly, where you can like kind of see in the top, the highest impact, lowest effort things, or the things that you maybe do first. But that's, again, not knowing your kind of organization strategy, because your strategy on the people side, like should reflect the business strategy. So not knowing that, I'm kind of giving a generic answer that I would have something more specific if I knew your business strategy.
I would say, at least for Vindex, we have rolled out an insane amount of programs, and we have implemented a quite robust system. So for us next year is going to be important to sort of assess what these have yielded, assessed our current employee population, understand where we're at, and what are going to be some of the key areas that we should focus on for 2022. One area that we're really focused on is recruitment, but not just recruitment, but talent acquisition. Us as an employer, what we offer, and how does that impact, or how does that measure with our current talent population? So what we have done in 2021 to who we have now, and how can we better take care of that population, and three, how to attract and retain talent.
Ask your organization, ask what they want to prioritize as well. I think that's a good point. And just having these frameworks is also important. So I would encourage reaching out to Erin as well. I know we have just a couple of minutes left, but I do want to kind of wrap up our conversation with a call to action for folks who are on this webinar, who are thinking about continuing to innovate their talent management process for the next coming year, taking anything and everything we've learned over the past 2 years and applying it to what we know to be true about people in general and what folks are looking for in their careers. So we'll start with Iraisa, and then we'll go Candace, Erin, and Cindy.
Mine's is pretty short. We play a critical role in any organization. We should be utilizing that to ensure that our teams are where they should be and have what they need to succeed. We should be working very, very closely with our leaders to drive the right and appropriate measures and programs and all of that great stuff to create the best environment possible.
Christina, can you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yes, absolutely. What is your call to action for folks on this webinar who are thinking about innovating their talent management process for the next year?
Yeah, I would say definitely start thinking about people analytics. I know it sounds a little foreign for, the people and culture teams, I think data will influence your teams in so many ways that are really beneficial and helpful. I don't think people really realize what's going on in an organization until you see the numbers in front of you. You see like, oh, it looks like we're somewhat diverse, until you're looking at the breakdown and you're just like, oh, wow, actually, this is not what I thought it was. So I would definitely say bring data to the table, and everything that you do in the people department, whether it's talent acquisition to just, people operations, be 100% like data focused. Second thing, I don't think you can really move your people team forward if you don't build integrity and trust with your employees. So that is so important, to have HR professionals that build that trust with the employees. You are the person that anyone in the organization should be able to come to, whether it is a frontline employee, a junior employee, to an executive. So how are you bringing your authentic self to work? How are you allowing others to do that? Whether it's whistleblowing, whether it's, I'm having a disagreement with my manager and I don't know how to handle it, or the manager's coming to you and being honest and saying, I have never dealt with this type of situation before. I need guidance. I need support. And I trust you to help me in this situation. So integrity and trust will lead the way, and analytics.
Those are all great answers. So I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction, which is about connections. So like high quality connections build high performing teams and highly engaged employees. So helping to enable that, that's also how information flows through an organization, as I said earlier, and it can be done. There are some great activities that can be done remotely. Also, you can do it in person. If you're going into an office, like that's what an office should be for more soft work than hard work. And so, yeah, I think there's like some great activities like pairing people together for 2 minutes randomly and having them figure out one thing they have in common, for example. Or there's this great, the executive director of Stanford Design School has this great exercise, which is like nonverbal conversation. So you take a bunch of pictures and you just send pictures back and forth for 15 minutes. So I think there's some great ways to do it remotely. And I know people are so zoomed out, so it doesn't have to be on Zoom with your face in a video, but I think it's just so important. And I think some of the issues that we're seeing about, engagement and retention, and I think it could really help. Yeah, anyway, that's my idea.
And I think I'm last, and I'll try to talk quickly. Mine is, I left my job over a year ago because I was extremely burnt out. And I spent years putting my job and everything else first and myself last. So my call to action and encouragement to people, professionals, and anybody really in the workplace is show up for yourself first, and then you'll be better equipped to show up for others. It's our time. We've got support. People are attuned to what they do. We do. We're better educated now. The candidates are better educated now. The workforce is better educated. Feel empowered to speak up for what you need, advocate for your worth, and set boundaries. It's okay to say no when something isn't feasible. Don't overextend yourself. Done.
That was great. That's a good call to action. And on, you can't pour from an empty cup. Iraisa, Candace, Erin, Cindy, thank you so much for spending this afternoon with us. And thank you for everyone for joining our webinar today live, and who's ever watching the recording. As a reminder, at AllVoices, we really believe in the employee feedback management as a requirement for the company to succeed on a whole. Have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.